I'm Brandon Costello. I have been with Adelphoi Village for the past 9+ years, and I was with my previous agency for 7 years prior to that. So since the ripe young age of 21, I have always worked in child management and in many different capacities, from residential to school-based programming to aftercare services, foster care and adoption. So I've really been all over the clinical gamut until last year when I was asked to take a position as our EHR analyst. So I have a 15-year history clinically almost, and about a year of EHR behind me. And with me is...
Hi, I'm Sam Steiner, Adelphoi Sam, as Echo Sam would call me. I am from Adelphoi for 1 year. I'm fresh out of college. It's my first job, and I studied EHRs in school, so I'm not the clinical side of the EHR team, but I'm more the technical side of the EHR team. And today we're going to talk about how we decided to re-implement Clinician's Desktop at Adelphoi. So our presentation is all about refreshing implementation, maintaining new forms that you might be implementing into your system. So before we get started, Adelphoi hasn't presented at Peer-to-Peer for a couple years, so just a background on who we are. Last year we served 1,800 families and clients. We have 650 employees. We have 28 different programs inside of the 32 different counties in Pennsylvania. And we have 62 counties total in Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and surrounding states that refer clients to Adelphoi Village. Our EHR history is that in the early 1990s, we had a very basic patient accounting system. We used that to track demographic information, see who was enrolled with us. A series of different project implementation teams went through with leadership, top directors, top supervisors. That's what Project Phoenix, Project Purple, and now Team Mustang are doing, is look at how we best should implement our system. And then we decided to go into Clinician's Desktop in 2001, so we've had the system for quite a while. We realized that what we were doing in the system wasn't working for us, so we actually were looking at other systems. To the left of our funnel there are the different systems we actually looked at within the past 2 years, switching from Clinician's Desktop, but we looked through all our criteria. We saw that Clinician's Desktop could do what we wanted it to do, and we stuck with Clinician. So that's our background on the EHR. So Adelphoi Village, why did we re-implement? Well, there's two reasons really. We have a vast coordination of care, so we have lots of different programs. Using the EHR efficiently is going to help us better utilize our own systems of care, and we have a large continuum. We're all the way across the state of Pennsylvania. So if we use our EHR properly, we're going to be able to have better clinical results. And Brandon, being clinical, is going to tell us a little bit more about that.
So you can see here our continuum of care. We go from a very less restrictive environment like aftercare services and alumni supports, all the way up to residential programming in a secure facility. We have 3 secure facilities. We have 21 residential group homes across the state of Pennsylvania. Those include short-term shelter, intensive supervision, sex offender programs, and a secure sex offender program. We also have things like diagnostic, a slew of community-based programs where we work with families through MST or family preservation services. Adoption services and permanency services are something that we have across the state of Pennsylvania, working with nearly 2,000 clients probably at this current time. Our education system, Adelphoi Education, is one of the sub-companies of the parent company Adelphoi. We have Adelphoi Education, Adelphoi Charter School, and then Adelphoi Village, which is the bulk of our treatment programs. Here's our map of where our programs lie across the state of Pennsylvania. Our home base is right here in Westmoreland County. So you can see we're in the southwestern region of Pennsylvania. However, we reach way up into our northeastern region of Pennsylvania. That's more than a 4-hour drive, maybe a 5-hour drive from our home campus to our furthest program in Pennsylvania. What the electronic health record is doing by implementing it is going to reduce a lot of drive time from our programs who once a month are going through file reviews and audits. And so we have staff driving down from Bradford County to Westmoreland County every month. And so we're just going to save drive time, staff time, that's clinical time that can be better be used with clients than driving back and forth across the state of Pennsylvania. So how did we know that we had to re-implement? First of all, it started at peer-to-peer last year. We were here, 3 of us came, myself as a clinical person, and Jennifer McLaren, who is my supervisor, my boss, was also present along with our director of financial operations. And it was very evident to us before coming to peer-to-peer that we had to re-implement, but why wasn't so clear until we were here. And one of the things that really made it evident was on the Monday night reception, Jen and I made it a goal that we were going to corner Tina Dickinson, and we were gonna really drill her on what we were doing wrong. And we were like, just give it to us straight, Tina, give it to us straight. And Tina's quote was, "Your processes are bad. They're really, really bad." But that's exactly what we wanted to hear. And that was a driving message in what... We did ask. We said, give it to us straight, and she did. And that's what we wanted. Because that was the one message that we took back from peer-to-peer to our leadership team at Adelphoi, was our processes are bad. And when we get a little bit farther into the presentation and when we talk about workflows, we're going to show you, it's a little embarrassing, just how bad our processes were. So you don't know what you don't know. That was something else that came out of peer-to-peer 2014. We didn't know the things that we were doing wrong. So we needed better education ourselves on the system, how it worked, how we could best utilize CDT and Revenue Manager. Understanding our operations and our current statuses and just how bad they actually were. We needed to look at ways to optimize the system as it was, and then admitting that our current processes were not working. And that's something that we had to get the entire Adelphoi community to do, was shut the trunk. So here's where our Team Mustang analogies are going to come in for maybe the remainder of the presentation. Team Mustang was formed as a re-implementation team. So when we led off after peer-to-peer, we used the theory of we have a car, and we have a clunker right now as we implemented it. So we were going to produce out of Team Mustang something that was fast, it was sleek, it was affordable. So it was going to be a nice Mustang. And in order to do that, we had to get everybody to shut the trunk on old issues in implementing Revenue Manager and Clinician's Desktop.
So we came up with a list of all the excuses we heard for months and months whenever Brandon and Jen and Andrea got back from peer-to-peer. We're just going to list a couple of them for you because this is just a fraction of everything we heard. So the first one is that the software is broken. We really weren't using it right, so kind of could figure that out.
Cannot do what we need it to do.
I can't read the reports. Well, maybe we should update our reports. Maybe they might make more sense then.
This is an IT project, not a clinical project.
Staff don't know how to enter the information. They haven't been trained yet, so.
It's not my job to do this, but it's gonna be.
Clinicians should not do this work.
Accounting is holding up the implementation.
RevMan doesn't work.
But it will. No project management yet.
This is the way we've always done it, which is huge. I'm sure that other people can relate to that one.
No one is in charge.
And finally, our processes are fine. Things are working. We're good to go, which is not the case. So Brandon started to talk about how all of our implementation has a car analogy of the Team Mustang, and this is just something that we say still to this day, that information, saying things that are working, getting hung up on stuff that has been done in the past, we need to put that in the trunk, and we need to close the trunk, and we need to move on, because we wasted a lot of valuable time looking at the excuses. So we've broken down our re-implementation into 6 different phases, which we'll go over today. The first phase is discovery. So we need to discover, first of all, what we're doing now and what we should be doing, what information we're capturing currently, where we're lacking, and where we have way too much information that we're collecting just for fun. The development phase will look at how are we going to build this in the system, how are staff going to be able to obtain this information, how are they going to be able to fill out forms on clinicians. Then we need to review before we send it off to ECHO, because it is an expense, it is an investment into your system. We need to test it, make sure that we have the right applications and that it's going to work for our clinical staff. We actually are going to talk about how our clinical staff for a month got these really fun tasks of testing it in the system, and they loved it so much. And then we'll talk about training, because that's where the bulk of our time was put into. And then we'll talk about how we audited everything that we did, and we always cycle back and make sure that everything was implemented correctly. So the first phase is discovery. The discovery phase included choosing the right people, so forming that group. We had tried to form a couple other re-implementation groups previously, but we were kind of mixed on higher level leadership who didn't really know what the line staff were doing, so we had to refocus that. We had to establish what our goals were for small periods of time so we didn't get ourselves overwhelmed. Evaluating what resources we have, because we really didn't have as many resources. And then appraising current state workflows, which were very, very messy. And we had to recognize that things are going to change, and that's just a culture we need to create. So our team is going to cover each department of our agency. So we had people, and we still currently meet, we're still implementing, a lot of our forms still need to go live. We have our residential, we have our foster care, and we'll get into that in the next slide. Well, you also need to establish ground rules. So we need to say that every week we're going to meet for 3 hours, but you also get 3 hours of homework. You need to communicate up and down your leadership chain. See what the line staff are doing, because oftentimes, even though we have procedures written, that's not actually what's happening in our units. People change their workflow to fit what's going on. And then you also need to gain support of your leadership. So making sure they're on board and they'll support the overtime that you might need for staff and the amount of time they'll be sitting in meetings, not being able to deal with crisis that might occur within the units. So this is our team. Again, we said we're Team Mustang. I don't really get cars, so I'm not the best person to talk about the car analogies. But we have incentive programs within Team Mustang. That's our racetrack. So whenever our staff are getting all their stuff done, we're collecting all our forms, making new forms. You get points on the racetrack, and then whoever gets there first gets a prize. Krista won once, and she's so excited about it. But we have people. We have people from our residential programs, our different community-based programs, education, all the different people who are affected by the EHR. So it was important to have finance there, because revenue manager is a huge project that needed to be completely re-implemented as well. And then for HIM, me and Brandon and our supervisor was the director of the project. She's on maternity leave right now, so she won't be here, but it's important that we had somebody really leading the team. And then IT, because this is a huge undertaking for the IT department as well. So we set our goals. We knew that we wanted to utilize EHR to cover our entire clinical record. We didn't set a strict date, because we knew we didn't want to implement things that didn't seem right. We didn't want to make ourselves look like we weren't meeting dates. And then we also want to utilize our EHR because we do have multiple programs that have quality measures and fidelity that we want to start to track. And then the last goal we wanted to set is that we wanted to coordinate care better. As Brandon alluded to before, we have programs all over the state, and we travel often just to get files from one place to another. Another thing during discovery is that we need to evaluate our resources. So my position was the first one. They recognized they needed somebody full-time to work on this project, so that's where I came into the play. We also looked at signature pads last year, just as an example. All our residential units had no signature pads. Now they each have 3. Some of them have 2, some of them have 3, depending on the size. We knew overtime was necessary for a lot of different projects, and then we brought Brandon on. So we're both analysts now, both work full-time with the EHR implementing. So this is the embarrassing part. This is where we were this time last year. These are our workflows. They're very messy, so don't judge us. This is what we were looking at just for a referral process for one of our programs, and every referral process was completely different. We were sending emails, posting things on SharePoint, making faxes, it was a mess. So These are just the different programs referring a client to one of our processes. Not even having them at intake. This is just a referral. So huge thing. We did this for all of our different processes, and it helped us see what information we're currently capturing and where our gaps are.
So from there we went into the development phase. And in development we started by creating our focus teams. So we broke out, again, collecting somebody from each facet of our agency. So we brought in a residential person, we brought in a foster care and adoption person, community-based programs, education-based programs, charter school. Every focus team was represented by somebody from each department across the Adelphoi board. We were sure that we consulted ECHO regularly. We started holding weekly phone conference meetings with ECHO Sam so that we were sure that if we had questions, they were getting answered. If we thought we had a way that we were going to use the system, was it the best way? And we kept up that constant communication on a regular basis, as well as flying Sam in whenever we needed her for a 2-day visit, a 3-day visit to work through processes. We utilized our ECHO consultants as much as we possibly could. That it also included end user involvement. So our focus teams, when we created them, it wasn't just pulling directors and supervisors of that program, but it was pulling in the line staff. It was pulling in the counselors instead of the people who are highest and farthest away from the information. We wanted the people who were closest to that information and utilized it. So when I looked at a form, I knew, what do you do with this form? What do you do with this form when you're done with it? Where does it go when it's complete? What's the information on the form needed for? So our focus teams. And we're going to show that we started with our equipment team, but we went through treatment plans, our health and safety screen, as well as safety plans, our incident screens, discharge codes. As of July 1st, we eliminated about 50-some discharge codes, and we went to discharge screens, which actually mapped what happened with our client at discharge that we went live with on July 1st. So it was great because we spent a lot of time with discharge codes trying to fit a kid's care for 2 years through the Adelphoi system into a 3-digit code that didn't always fit the situation. By creating these screens and maps, we were able to find out where our clients went when they left, what other services were involved, what recommendations we made. Our demographics team, to look at our demographic screens and the information we capture on our clients, staff data and how we utilized it, which we use staff data not only in Adelphoi to capture our staff information, but also our foster care, foster parent information is all captured in staff data, so we can track it, put alerts on it, and follow that. Revenue manager is a team that started at the very beginning and is still continuing to meet on a regular basis. Assessments, progress notes, reporting, external information, the med team, remaining documentation, and then permissions, validation, settings, and configurations. So these were all separate sub-teams that met every week, 3 hours a week, and had 3 hours of expected homework time out of each meeting. Yes?
Since you're spread a ways across Pennsylvania, did you have people from the different locations come to one site, or how did you handle that?
We would utilize video conferencing. We had polycoms, conference calls, but we tried to not bring in people from really remote sites because everyone in our continuum, our programs, we all have close to us as well. So we were able to bring in reps from all the areas of our continuum that were pretty much local. Good question, thank you. We had to look at what was necessary versus what would be nice. People like to capture information, but it's not always utilized. So if we're not using it, we're not going to do it just because that's the way it's always been done. What is the information we need and why? And what do we have to do with that information? And also to keep in mind, making our forms user-friendly for the end user. That's why it was so important to have those clinical line staff in use. A big question was, is this a regulation? We really hounded why. Why is this information important? Is it a regulation? We're DHS certified, we are JCO certified, as well as we work with a lot of MCOs and managed care organizations. So we have a lot of people we have to report out to. So we want to make sure we were capturing what we needed, but not getting information that we didn't use. So we would visit every 2 months during the early stages for things like RevMan, training setup, CD training. We would hold weekly 1-hour calls with Echo. We had training that we did with Jason on JDESI forms. Echo came live for our go live day. Tina and Echo Sam were both present for our go live. And again, I don't have a problem quoting Echo and saying that this was the smoothest go live they had ever experienced while they were on site. And it was great that they were there because we didn't have any issues. We were able to work on other things we were planning in development. So we got to look at all the future screens that we already had specs on and got to use their time very efficiently while they were there. We were able to have our Tina and Sam meet with our leadership to really drive home what we're doing right, where our barriers are, and have those honest communications that weren't coming from us as the people who were driving the implementation. So that was really great as well. And also, of course, to constantly support the revenue manager team after go live.
Okay, so after we go through our discovery phase and our development phase, we always want to make sure we're reviewing what we're talking about. So I make these graphs every 6 months for Adelphoi. It holds us accountable. We show this to leadership and to anybody else who might need to look at where we are, and it is like a car theme roadmap. So it lets the leadership know everything we're working on, all our different teams, when they can expect training to come up, that sort of thing. So we review if we're on track. Literally, because it's a, car. Okay. I'm not going to try anymore.
Good job.
So when we review, we want to gather leadership. We want to review this with our directors. We always make sure we have approval because all of our different programs, we don't want to send over and make that investment of paying for this new screen to be built whenever we miss something. And then you want to set up your processes so they last a long time. We don't want to have to keep on changing them. So our rule of thumb is normally around 3 years if we know a form will last us that long. We know that our regulations change frequently though, but in an ideal world, they would last us at least 3 years. And just as a reminder that we always tell ourselves if we don't like how something looks or we don't think it's going to flow well, we always go back and do discovery again. We start over because it's really not worth the amount of time and energy Echo would put into it, our IT department would put into it to make a form when it's really not going to work for us.
So then next came testing. And this was a really fun time for everyone at Adelphoi. Testing. And who are the people who need to test? Well, those are your end users. Those are the people who are going to be using your forms, using the system. So we got together a group of test drivers. We were going to call them test dummies at one point and realized that probably wasn't so smart. So they became our test drivers on our track. And so we created a database for testing. So we had our live testing database, which is where we would make all of our changes and recommendations from the test drivers. We formed a solid plan of how testing would occur, and we used a sprint cycle to do that. So every Monday morning at 8 o'clock, Sam and I would send out the new sprints to the test drivers. They would do their sprint by department. So each department was assigned certain sprints to finish. And then they would provide that feedback on forms that we created for them to easily give us back feedback. Yes?
What do you mean sprint? What is a sprint?
A sprint, it's a project development term where you're giving an assignment on a limited amount of time. So in this case, each sprint lasted 2.5 days. So if we had testing would occur from Monday at 8 a.m. to Wednesday at noon. Wednesday at noon, all feedback was due, and the next sprint started at noon, where they would get new assignments that had to be completed by end of day on Friday.
So the assignments, you mean you would tell them, I want you to work in this part of the application?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
So we might load some new screens in, and we would ask the group that use those particular screens to go in and test those specific screens. One thing we were cautious not to do was overwork our test drivers by having them test everything that they didn't need to utilize in their job, and so the feedback wouldn't be good feedback. We wanted good testing from the people who were actually going to use the information that we were presenting. You're welcome. Good question. Thank you.
So, was testing done with live clients in a dummy database, or did they have to do double entry what do you mean by they tested?
Yeah, the first round of testing was in a blank database, so we tested the whole demographic screens, making sure we could add a client properly, making sure we had everything set up right. And then after that, we dumped our live database into the testing environment, and they tested on our actual clients.
Hey, can I ask?
Yeah.
How was the morale? How did you keep the test drivers' morale?
Yes.
at work?
No, yeah. Yeah, so
We did put aside, one of the requirements for our test drivers was that if it took our units paying overtime, that's what they did, but that they had to be able to do 2 hours of testing every single day in an isolated area away from clients, away from other staff, so that they could drill out a specific time where they knew from 10 to 12, this is when I'm doing testing every day. And their supervisors knew during that time, that's what they were doing, that was their job task. If we had to pay them overtime to do a session later in the day, that's what had to be done, but that this was of the utmost importance. And we had full support from our leadership team in doing that. So it provided us a lot of really good feedback. We were easily able to receive the feedback, make changes, and then retest. So our sprint cycles actually lasted 8 weeks. Mm-hmm. So we did 8 weeks of 2 sprints a week. So in the end, we had 16 sprints. So one thing, this is not a fun task.
it's not.
So I think it was worse for me and Sam than anyone, because we were the two who were receiving back all of the feedback, had to categorize it and figure out, is it real or not? And then we ended up actually testing a lot of that information ourselves as well. And this is the feedback form that we used to categorize everything that was given to us in the form of feedback on a separate sheet that we received. So we made up a feedback sheet that was really easy for the staff to utilize, and then we dumped all of that information into here for us to utilize.
Question.
Yes?
During this testing phase, do you have to deal with any staff turnover?
That's
No.
really, we do have some issues with turnover, some of our residential units, but we try to choose people who, from previous trainings we saw, were energetic and interested in both Adelphoi and the system. So I never thought about that, but we didn't have any issues with turnover.
None of our test drivers
No.
turned over during that process.
The reason I'm asking is because you could have somebody who was test driving for so many weeks or so many days, and then they leave, and then you've got to get somebody else up to speed.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the people were carefully selected to be test drivers. It wasn't like randomly, hey, give me one of your workers, give me one of your workers, give me one of your workers. The test drivers were handpicked by us along with the leadership team in support of that person being a test driver. So we were picking clinically stronger staff, not our new right out of college and they've been with us 3 weeks kind of staff. It's the ones that had been around and we knew that we were going to get good feedback from.
So going with that, and we're going to start to talk about training. People who were our test drivers, we tried to make sure that they definitely were getting their overtime. We gave them a swap bonus whenever our testing was done. And a lot of those people turned into our training helpers because we have 650 staff. We had to train all the staff that needed the system, so it's about 590 staff we had to train. So we wanted those people who were our test drivers to help us in our training efforts, which was the bulk of me and Brandon's summer is training. So we just want to express how important training is to us. So after we did testing, we had to train. So we trained some more, and then we trained. And then there was some more training after that, actually. No, not that type of train. We trained, and then some more. We just trained and trained, and it was a lot of fun, really. So the training altogether, we had 4 different phases of this training. The first training started last January, where we trained all our residential programs just how to get into the system, because a lot of them hadn't been in the system. We do our barge forms for our juvenile delinquent clients in the system, but other than that, our residential folks really hadn't been exposed to clinicians. So we also introduced them our individual and our family counseling progress notes. So that was all residential staff, from our youth care worker to our supervisors, doing a 4-hour training with us, hands-on. And then in March, we did group counseling sessions, so using group templates, some more information about signing and tagging, and back in the old admin side we were using at the time, using some filters. And that was a train-the-trainer process, so 2 people from each of our residential programs had to come to a 3-hour training that we held. And then in June, all of our staff, so that's 590 staff that were trained on the visual health record. So we introduced them how to maintain demographic information, our new discharge forms. And then most recently, in August, we did referral sources, informed parties, and legal status. So that's another addition to our client profile to make it more comprehensive. And that was a couple different approaches to that training we wanted to test out. So first we sent out videos of how to do referral sources, and then later in the week we had actual training occur, so live training, and then the next week we had link sessions. So we had a couple link sessions, anybody could attend and watch us go through all those screens. So.
Yes, sir.
I saw in the beginning there that you started out with version 2 and then you went eventually to version 10. Did you migrate a little bit at a time, or was it like one big major conversion?
No, we migrated bits at a time over years. We started out with CDT2 in 2003. We held on to, I believe, version 7 for a really long time. So our first major upgrade occurred, I'm going to say, back in 2010 was when we went to 9. Would that be an accurate timeline? So in 2010, I'm going to say we went to CDT 9. We stayed on 9 until July 1st when we went live with CDT 10 and went with the full visual health record. Prior to that, everything was done on the administrative side.
And time phasing, this new re-implementation started at what point in that migration?
We started a full year before go live in implementing in our planning process.
We were already on 10 when that occurred.
No, we were on 9 when that occurred. We were on 9 and only on the administrative side.
Good question, thank you. So there's 4 different things that we made sure all of our trainings had. There's 4 different components, so we illustrated it. We went through and explained what all the different fields mean, so they knew exactly what we were asking them to capture. Then we would demonstrate, so this is how you fill out an individual counseling session, this is how you sign an individual counseling session, and then we let them do hands-on. So we would break and have 15 minutes. We had mock examples for them to type into the system. And then before we moved on to anything, we asked them to repeat back what they had just learned. So we made sure that each of those end users knew exactly what they were doing, and we were confident before they left that they would be able to go back to the units. We wanted to make sure that people knew where support was. That was huge. So me and Brandon always are here for support. We have a helper in our office who kind of fields through all our different support issues. And we wanted to make sure between training and go live, we had lots of time for questions because we got lots and lots of questions. So from last January until today, we had to break it down a little bit. Adelphoi paid 796 hours of our own staff to train our other staff. So that's me and Brandon and our training helpers training other people. 590 staff were trained in the month of June, and we maintained training for our new screens. So training is huge for our re-implementation. I think that's really where our main focus was. And we wanted to make sure that supervisors were good points of reference, so we always did more intensive training just for supervisors so they could help direct their staff before the staff come to us, and also our IT department. So communication is huge. In January, when we did our first round of training, we recognized that a lot of people didn't even know what the EHR was. That was our first question we asked, what's the EHR? And it was kind of, it hurt my feelings, but nobody knew what it was. That's when we decided that we needed a better form of communication across Adelphoi for the EHR. So we made sure that the supervisors and the units would get emails before training for their staff would occur. Right now what we're doing is a bi-weekly email reminder to tag all our activities, so the communication is still going on. Me and Brandon will show up at different residential homes, and whenever they have their unit meetings, we'll go over a couple things in the system that they might be struggling with. And we have an Adelphoi Inside Edition, and we always have, recently it's been like 4 or 5 EHR stories, so it's a little excessive right now, but the more communication that we have throughout our agency has really been important. That we recognize through training, people really didn't understand what we were trying to do.
And then finally, after go live, came the auditing process. So we needed to make sure that our staff were doing everything come July 1 that we had spent, how many hours training?
796.
796 hours training. Were our staff actually doing it? So that's where our auditing processes came in. So, and I was forewarned by Echo Sam that she was going to be checking on us and our licenses to see how often our clients were in, or our staff rather, were in the system and utilizing the system. And I never heard anything bad from Echo Sam, so that was a good sign. But we started doing things like running the activity edit listing report, which is a canned report. It was able to tell us the number of sessions going in. It was giving us quality measure indicators immediately, which is something that we wanted. It let us know how often our supervisors were tagging activities. And that was the hardest part of implementing, was getting supervisors to actually tag individual counseling sessions, family counseling sessions, and our group sessions. It's not a hard process, so it was more of a workflow process within the unit of supervisors reviewing the material that the staff were putting in. So it wasn't so much that it was a tagging issue, but it was a staff working with their clients, timely getting it in the system and acquiring the needed signatures. So that was the piece that was really on our radar by auditing, and we have been able to, since July 1, really clean up. And I send out at the end of each month a report to all residential supervisors on all of their untagged activities by running this report and emailing it out to them. We also did things like just random spot checks. So on July 1st, all their demographic information was supposed to be updated, their addresses were supposed to be updated, phone numbers. We unlocked the Relations tab for the first time ever in Clinician's Desktop. We had never used the Relations tab, and previously we put everybody on the Address tab. So if they were working with our client, their telephone number and name and address, everything went in that Address tab. And we kind of liked doing it that way, and Sam kept telling us that we were doing it wrong, and we were kind of trying to give pushback and say, we accept that we're doing it wrong, but we really like doing it this way. And Sam would give pushback and say, no, you're really doing it wrong, and here's why you need to do it the right way. And then we went back and said, one of our rules from the beginning was no dirty processes, and we're going to use the system right. So ultimately we gave in, and we had let Echo Sam know that she was correct, and we did exactly what our project director told us to do. Then we started to implement the EHR Star Award. This is something that we do right now on a monthly basis, and we go in and just do spot checks on staff. So this staff works with this client, and we pick them at random, and we go in and look at that client's record. So are there activities in? Are there sessions signed? Are there progress notes completed in full? Is it good documentation? Are there demographic screens up to date? And at random, we'll then pick an EHR star, and they get a $100 gift certificate to Walmart as an incentive. And then we post that winner in our bi-weekly internal newsletter so that everyone knows, here's somebody who's doing it right, and here's the reward they get for their hard work. So it's just the little things, trying to recognize them whenever we can. And we've also created supervision plans for staff and even supervisors who are not keeping up with what they need to do. As we continue to implement more and more pieces, and we always went with a soft rollout for the fact that we didn't want to bombard everything in electronic health record and do away with a paper file all on July 1st. So we've been implementing in sections, in pieces. So if we got behind now when it's easy, we were really going to suffer as we implement farther. So we've taken whatever means were necessary to get everybody on board, from the line staff and the units all the way up to the supervisors, program directors, and administrators. And then cycling back when it's not working. So a great example of that is we created an informed party screen as part of our implementation. So our informed parties are things like pay sources and people who need to get reports and all that kind of stuff. And then we realized, oh, that should have been part of our release of informations. So we're okay with cycling back and redoing something in order to do it right. So, Sam, did we forget anything?
Yes, we really did. We forgot a huge step in our reimplementation, and that is mine and Brandon's favorite subject of data conversion. Yes, this was a fun task as well. Something that Brandon and Jen learned last year at Peer-to-Peer was you need to start data conversion now. If you plan to do this in a year, you should really start looking at data conversion now. Well, we didn't really listen, and we literally forgot to put this in the slide because we tried to erase this from our memory, how painful data conversion can be. So take this as a lesson. Data conversion takes so much planning and so much time. Everybody at your agency really needs to be involved, making sure you're really going to use this report in the new system. If you haven't run it in 5 years, you're probably not going to run it next month. So we looked at eliminating old reports. We still have our CD9, so if we need to go back and pull out old clinical information, we still have it, but data conversion was a hot topic. There were lots and lots of fun meetings that we held about data conversion.
Day-long meetings.
Yes. Day-long meetings, and because we really didn't take the initiative that we should have. So we would suggest listening when they tell you to start data conversion a year before you re-implement, because it really hurt. It was just not fun.
But one really nice piece of our data conversion was the fact that we were able to get a script written by Echo.
Yes.
And now, again, I'm that clinical person, so when I say script, it means, you know, like Bruce goes and does his little SQL script and just gives it to us, and we plug it into the computer and it just works. And that's how in my mind it happens.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that's really how our data conversion ended up going, because we did reach out to Echo and kind of say we've created our own hot mess and we need help. And they did write us an amazing script that crosswalked from here in 9 to here in 10, and we all just had like a huge sigh of relief. So it was all good in the end.
All good in the end, but it was not, we should have listened to them from the beginning.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
So, data conversion is very broad. Can you give us some specific examples? 'Cause
Yes.
I know in our system, it was set up a couple years before I started, not that I would have been smarter about setting it up, but there was like, the location field was used for program, and
Yes.
program field was used for department. So is that what you're talking about?
It's that. It's bringing over all of our custom reports, all of our custom screens. Brandon mentioned earlier that we never used the relations tab before at all. So people who were documented as an aunt or uncle in the address screen, we wanted them to be moved to the relations screen with different types than what they were before in the address screen. So it was really where the data is going, and also what forms we're bringing over with us. What screens are we bringing over with us?
So did you start with like a brand new clean database?
Yeah.
And you imported stuff?
Yeah.
didn't try to like upgrade from what you had.
No, it was a clean, what's the word? Clean install. Thank you, Echo Sam.
So I have one other question.
Yeah.
too. From your screens, it looks like your director or whoever gave you a lot of power for dictating kind of how the clinicians were going to handle things. So was that like difficult thing? Were they hesitant about that? I mean, did you really get all the support? I mean, obviously you get the support you needed because you did it, but do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. It really goes back to our leadership. Our leadership, we were able to meet with and explain to them what the advantage is, show them our processes and explain to them how really terrible they are. We're wasting our own money, paying staff to do things that are completely duplicate. So I think that through those examples and through those meetings, they worked leadership down, getting the support of the staff.
We really worked hard for the support of our leadership. You know, they always say they're behind you and then do a good job, but they're really not always hands-on behind you. And we made sure that they were hands-on behind us. So not only did we have Team Mustang, who really was the authority on the decision making. So when we would do discovery and find out this is the information we want to collect, here's how we want to collect it, it went to Mustang for a decision. But ultimately there was times where we couldn't be the authority on, okay, the CEO requested this report be made 5 years ago and it's been run 6 times. Do we keep this report? Well, the CEO asked for it. So the Team Mustang had a dealership that they answered to, and that was really our leadership team made up the dealership. So when the decision couldn't be made by just us, we did go up to the higher authority for the approval. And that included addressing barriers or any problem we foresaw with moving forward with implementation. So presently today, we're actually involving the Covey model into our EHR processes so that supervisors and directors have a wildly important goal each week in implementing the electronic health record. And so that's helping to keep the entire agency accountable for all initiatives in the EHR.
And it's also helping us move forward. So we're looking at getting our health and safety screens into the system. We're looking at getting all of our progress notes, not just the individual family and group counseling session progress notes, but the Covey goal is going to help us get moving faster because we want to make progress in the next year on this.
Yes.
Yes.
So you pulled all of the activities and all of the surrounding, the supporting information from 10 years of being on the system into this version?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's awesome.
Well, not the activities, but the client profiles. The activities stayed except for our current residential, family, and individual counseling sessions.
Refer back to the other version if you want historical data beyond.
If we want historical data attached to activities, we're going to pull that out of 9, which we have kept, select people have access to CDT 9.
Yeah, and I've only been requested once to go in and pull reports for somebody out of 9, surprisingly. So.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you redo any of your workflows?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
To see the difference.
Yes.
we probably should have put
We
a
should have
slide
put
in
that
of
in there.
this is the old
Yeah.
workflow, this is the new workflow.
I'm a total Visio geek, so everything has a nice new clean workflow and it makes me happy, but it was really bad.
Yes. And part of that was getting them to admit that workflows were bad. We would touch the same piece of paper 5 times through a referral process and clean up from beginning to end how our workflows went. When we started this process more than a year ago, people didn't even know what a workflow was. And now that is really Adelphoi lingo these days as people use the word workflow on a regular basis. And they know what that means.
We had to do workflow examples of how to make a cup of tea, how to make your bed, and I made the team go through and map out literally how would you make your bed. That's the type of information we want to collect on your daily processes. So, but now today they drop that word like everybody knows what a workflow is.
Anything else? Yes, sir.
Small. Everyone's got monthly and quarterly reports that they have to do. Did you just build that into your timeline as far as the reimplementation?
Yeah, that's one of our focus teams that is working on the monthly and quarterly reports.
We haven't implemented them yet. They're coming.
If somebody asked you now what you would do differently over the last 15 months, what recommendation would you give? What recommendation they would give if somebody asked what you would do differently?
I think one would be to ask for more help internally in
Yeah.
Adelphoi. Sam and I were working literally 50, 60-hour work weeks every single week. In the summer, we were lucky enough to get some interns, and that really helped to lessen the load. So to have that a little bit more internal help in the EHR department, I think would have been something in hindsight I would have asked to prepare for. Anything else? All right. Well, thank you.